Hi everyone.
We
Today
have
I
a Facebook
am
page.
I am with Ahmed Khatib. I don't know how he pronounces it, but I was expecting a Palestinian accent gentleman from Arab, but he's this Yankee California accent guy. So I would love to know more about him and share with you who he is. So Ahmed, who are you? Where did all this
Awesome.
start from?
Well, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity and for your time. So my name is Ahmed Alkhatib, or Alkhatib if you want to say it in Arabic. I am a United States citizen originally from the Gaza Strip. I came to the United States 11 years ago as an exchange student with a U.S. State Department program. It was a post 9/11 initiative to try to repair some damage that happened as a result of the September 11th attacks. So basically, it brought Middle Eastern and Pakistani students onto an exchange program for a year, go to an American high school, live with a host family, and then basically kind of develop an understanding of the United States, the people, the culture, and take that back home. So I left Gaza in '05 and then came to the United States. I was very lucky to have ended in the San Francisco Bay Area, which is one of the best parts of the United States, I think. And I finished the program. It was great. We learned a lot. I had amazing experiences, met incredible folks, developed a long list of goals and ambitions as a result of my exposure. So I attempted to return to Gaza, Palestine in 2006. And as you know, Gaza, often you have the only way to access it for most Palestinians is through Egypt. So I went to Egypt. I tried to access Gaza. Unfortunately, there had been a flare up in violence in Gaza. This was simultaneous with the 2006 Lebanon war and the 2006 abduction of the Israeli soldier in Gaza, Gilad Shalit. So the borders closed between Egypt and Gaza, and I was stuck there for 4 months, unable in Egypt, trying to go into Gaza, and unfortunately couldn't do so. So I basically researched options, and I managed to return to the United States because that was really the only way for me to proceed with my education and to basically be able to settle down. Came back to the United States, finished my last year of high school, and developed. I've always been an old soul in a young body ever since I was a child. So I've just basically developed a program for how I'm going to establish a life in the United States. Long story short, a lot of things were going really horribly in Gaza, where my entire immediate and extended family live. I'm the only one who managed to come out here. And I was able to receive political asylum status in the United States, which led to acquiring the permanent residency, and ultimately led to getting citizenship, which I acquired 2 years ago. Simultaneous with that, I've always been very ambitious in terms of academics. So I got an associate degree for a couple of years, then transferred, and I got a bachelor's in marketing, and with a heavy dose of entrepreneurship, especially because in San Francisco we're very close to the Silicon Valley, the tech startup scene, and I in fact did work in quite a few tech startups in various capacities, both as an intern while I was in college, and then after I left school. So my whole life dream was to be a pilot. I loved aviation and airplanes ever since being a child. Unfortunately, Gaza actually had a short-lived airport from '98 to 2002, and I traveled through that airport a couple of times. My whole dream was to basically be a pilot working at that airport, flying for the small Palestinian airlines. As with a lot of things around the world, politics kill ambitions and politics destroy dreams. So the airport was destroyed because of violence and issues, and I felt that basically was the end of my dream. When I came to the United States, basically, it's challenging, but it's not very hard to acquire a private pilot's license and to basically, enter the world of aviation. So that dream was revived, although practical considerations were such that I was like, okay, realistically, I don't know if the timing is right for me to be a pilot. But what that did was that sparked a desire for me to do something meaningful for my people using aviation as a tool. Now, in Gaza, most people would think, you have the violence, border closures, you have shortages, you have a humanitarian difficult situation. Um, So people wouldn't necessarily think of aviation as a tool. They'd be like, well, there are a lot of other needs before that. And I actually took it upon myself to turn that around. And in 2010, I started thinking about the first seed of an airport project in Gaza was begun for me. I met a friend, and this is one of the things I love and appreciate about your methodology, your work, is I met someone who worked for UN Aviation. Now, most people don't necessarily think UN and aviation, but I learned about the vast world of UN aviation, humanitarian air operations that are conducted in war zones and in natural areas hit by natural disasters, to bring in humanitarian relief and supplies, to fly in aid workers and diplomats, to fly people in and out, patients, students, and others in need to get in and out, and sometimes even to contribute to some form of local commerce, not on the mass scale that happens with seaports or commercial cargo, but to assist with basically giving folks an option to connect with the outside world. I met a gentleman who worked on an Ilyushin 76 transport aircraft, a massive transport airplane, and he worked in Sudan and Pakistan. Sudan throughout up in both the north and the south. And he worked in Pakistan, particularly during the floods in 2010. There have been several floods in Pakistan, but 2010 saw really severe ones. So that was sort of the first time that in a contemporary sense, like a light bulb went off for me in terms of, like UN aviation, like the United Nations is very big and active in Gaza. Why don't we figure out a way to basically synchronize UN existing operations in Gaza with the UN aviation model, which is successfully implemented now around the world, Haiti, Pakistan, Sudan, and then around the Middle East right now, you got you got Syria, Iraq, and Yemen, and Libya, and then you got Africa, places like Democratic Republic of Congo, Mali, Somalia, different places. So that was number one, and then immediately also, I thought of the fact that there was a UN airport in Gaza during the 50s and 60s, and we've published a lot of images from UN archives. We've talked about this in our Facebook page, Project Unified Assistance. So that was the first light bulb that went off as I was working in Silicon Valley, as I was basically engaged in entrepreneurial training, and I had a lot of mentors who were preparing me to work in the Valley. The second seed for how I wanted to use aviation as a way of helping my people in Gaza in a humanitarian and somewhat politically neutral way is in 2011, when yet again I met someone essentially randomly through a connection, a friend of mine. And this gentleman is an engineer who works in for a big international firm. I'm going to refrain from mentioning his name and his firm, but basically he's an engineer who designs airports around the world. And we sat down and we basically talked about my ambitions, my goals, and the Gaza aviation. And I told him that I want to think about a UN airport project. So he did an analysis using his software, using his systems, and came to the conclusion that in order to do this effectively, you need a new location from the old one. So there was an old location right by the Israeli and Egyptian borders, and that presents a lot of operational challenges in terms of flight routes, air traffic control, security, and other strategic matters. So he said by choosing a new location, you're going to be able to overcome some of those obstacles and to basically present something that is digestible. So, for example, you want to, instead of flying over Egyptian airspace like the old Gaza airport used to, or instead of flying close to Israeli airspace, flying over the Mediterranean directly without touching either Israeli or Egyptian airspaces would reduce security risks for both of these nations and would enable us to fly over international waters and to benefit from international rules that regulate aviation over water. So that was one thing. It would basically enable us to have a very limited air traffic control zone where we don't interfere with any Egyptian or Israeli aviation operations, whether that be civil or military. It also enables us to make sure that the airport would be away from smuggling tunnels. We want this to be a strictly humanitarian operation We don't want any bad actors benefiting from the airport. We want to address all Israeli security concerns, and a lot of those security concerns are summed up in preventing the smuggling of weapons, preventing the smuggling of fighters, and addressing scenarios for hijackings to prevent a 9/11 style attack in Israel. And that was seed number 2 in 2011. So 2010, 2011, it happened. And then ever since then, I started slowly but surely building the concept and the proposal. I go to Silicon Valley. I worked in it for a little bit. I worked in search engine optimization. I worked for firms that worked in technology and communications and routers. But after a while, though I very much so appreciated the skills I've learned from Silicon Valley, I appreciated the knowledge and the systems and platforms, using Salesforce, using web design, using all sorts of technologies. I still wasn't satisfied in terms of fulfillment, personal fulfillment. I felt that I was on a mission. I was one of very few Palestinians who managed to settle here under the category of asylum. I felt like I was blessed in that I picked up English a lot, in part because when I came here, unlike a lot of immigrants that come with their families and inevitably, they have their immediate circle, I didn't have my family. I didn't just click with the Palestinian community. My community was everyone. I mean, my community was Latinos, Jews, Americans. It was international folks. It was a truly global community that I connected with, and I feel that really contributed to me picking up English really well, kind of losing my accent, though I never had a thick accent to begin with. So I feel blessed in that I have the gift of language. I feel blessed in that I have an analytical mind that prioritizes, reasoning and rational thinking and strategic thinking over getting too emotional over certain issues. Though emotions are important. Emotional intelligence is important, but I think there's a beautiful balance between using your emotional intelligence to sort of develop your personality, develop your character and solid personal traits, versus letting emotions getting in the way and letting irrational thoughts and an irrational way of dealing with things getting in the way of realistic thinking and actually getting things done, actually achieving. So I felt, and then finally, as a U.S. citizen, I felt that, I had a lot more options that were available to me, not just in terms of travel and in terms of stability, but in terms of just, this is now a new dimension of my identity, so it's I come from a Muslim background. So, there's just different, and it's there's the Palestinian identity, the Muslim identity, and the Arab identity. And then now there is very much so this American identity that I'm actually proud of. And I think it's this American identity that really enabled me to be creative, to pursue my dreams, to build something meaningful, and to think big. Don't just think for me, I'm speaking for myself, don't just think in terms of, maximizing your financial return and just getting the biggest materialistic gains. I actually want to have a radius of impact. I want my skills, my life, my presence in this universe to impact as many people as possible. And I feel that what I'm doing right now with this organization that I started, and I'll wrap the introduction up by just speaking a little more specifically about what the organization is, Project Unified Assistance. But yeah, I feel that right now what I'm doing is basically an attempt to bring stability to Gaza and help 2 million people who have no options, who are isolated, many of whom would love alternatives to, terrible politics and violence, and many of whom want to be entrepreneurs. They want to have companies. They want to start businesses. They don't want to be in perpetual conflict with Israel. They want genuine peace. And I'm not talking about peace in terms of what the politicians negotiate. I'm talking about peace that starts at the human, individual, most fundamental component of societies are people. You invest in people, they can travel. If they can go outside for their education, they can go outside for treatment, they can actually meet people from different parts of the world, then that is going to serve as a stabilizing factor. It's going to reduce the likelihood of radicalization. It's going to introduce new possibilities. And I actually think that's not just beneficial for the 2 million Palestinians living in Gaza. It's also beneficial for the Israelis on a variety of levels. The Israeli people, the Israeli government, the Israeli strategic outlook as to how they want to deal with the conflict absent the comprehensive resolution. Because a comprehensive resolution is, I just don't think, I don't think we need to put all of our eggs in that basket anymore, because people are dying, people are getting radicalized, violence is persisting. So I think we definitely need an outside-the-box, fresh approach. So then to conclude, I'd like to just say briefly, what is Project Unified Assistance? So instead of just having this idea, this concept, it was an idea that became a concept that I then turned into a proposal. I wanted to basically see if the United Nations, if entrepreneurs, if I wanted to shop around and see who would take this on. And I realized that it's going to be a while before people really see my vision, believe in it, and understand the potential. So I wanted to create an organizational framework to support this proposal, to build it, to establish connections, to connect with entrepreneurs, with the United Nations, with Israelis. We want to do this in cooperation with Israel. We don't want to do this in defiance of Israel. We want to work together to actually do something that'll benefit the people, not just something that is going to be for politicians to talk about behind closed doors. So Project Unified Assistance is a U.S.-based nonprofit humanitarian organization that is advocating for the establish a UN-operated and regulated airport in the Gaza Strip. This project the reach of this concept has grown significantly. We now have a significant presence on social media. This is on the table in Palestine. A lot of folks know about this. I've been socializing this in front of the United Nations, in front of Israeli circles, in front of Palestinian circles. We're trying to get philanthropists, entrepreneurs, social entrepreneurs on board, because we don't want to just deal with this project through the framework of traditional politics. In the spirit of thinking outside the box, we want this to be a truly global effort to help the Palestinian people in Gaza. And to be clear, I recognize that there are a lot of things that need to happen in Gaza. It's not just a matter of an airport, but I actually think, and I should be clear that we have a board of directors, we have an advisory council, and I work with over 40 volunteers around the world. All of us are volunteers. None of us get paid. We don't have the financing for the organization. But we have what we believe is a really practical proposal that is digestible for all parties, that is basically within reach. And there have been a lot of signals sent to us by folks within, and this is all at an individual level and indirectly, but folks within the UN, folks within Israel, and that's not just Israeli citizens, but includes folks in think tanks, military and intelligence apparatus, politicians, all indirectly and on a personal level, who are saying this sounds really interesting and this sounds like something that is doable. We're not creating something from Mars. Basically, we have a historic precedent, which is the UN successfully operated an airport in Gaza in the 50s and 60s. It served the locals and it served the United Nations. And we have a contemporary precedent, which is UN humanitarian air operations that are now conducted around the world successfully. So you have historic and contemporary precedents, and then how wonderful. We want to do it in a way that guarantees Israeli security needs, that also addresses the needs of the Palestinian Authority, who have some sensitivities about, they don't want to do too much compartmentalization of the solutions to Gaza. And that's why we want the Palestinian Authority on board. We want the UN on board. We want Israel on board. And, we think that we can garner international support from the Europeans, from Arab and regional countries, from philanthropists and social entrepreneurs. So I'm very optimistic. I am very hopeful. And that's what keeps me going right now. And I'm very blessed to be where I'm at right now.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for this amazing introduction of yourself, and I'm very honored to meet you.
Thank you. Likewise. I really